Afternoon, James at this is James at the EverLearner. Too loud, Marta?
I think that I'm going to hiding somewhere by a gated star, baby.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is James at the EverLearner. We've had a very interesting experience in the last few moments because our video setup just completely failed us, which is kind of intriguing when you're just about to go live. When you're just about to go live for the first time in a series of actually over 30 sessions we're doing in the coming days on PE and Spanish. So not ideal, but we're here. And I actually don't know what's on screen, Marta. I know it's not me, so I can pick my nose. I can do whatever I want. So we've got the live revision whole screen. So guys, what we're going to do is I'm going to run you through a couple of bits and bobs. Hopefully by the time that I come back onto the stream, we'll have a bit of camera of me. I know you're all looking forward to seeing a bit of James. I don't know why, but some people seem to want to. So yeah, so we'll hopefully have that sorted out at the moment. Nevertheless, the main bits, which are the teaching elements tonight, we've got absolutely fine, no problem at all. Okay, a couple of things that I need you to be aware of. Thing number one, we are moving between two different microphones within this session. So if your audio is just at the right pitch and level right now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to when we switch to the sort of the teaching canvas bit. That the microphone I'm speaking on now is kind of one that sits in front of me and I don't move around it too much. The microphone I use when I'm doing the teaching bit, it's sort of attached to me. I move around quite a lot, and there's like, we try to make the levels the same, but they're a little bit different. So be prepared just to just be prepared to adjust your levels if you need to. Secondly, and I can't emphasize this strong enough, folks, we need you guys to subscribe to the session. I'm going to repeat that. We need you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel we're using for this for these revision shows, the way this is working basically is that we can keep this free for people if you guys do the honourable thing and subscribe to us. Now, there's numerous reasons for that, but the main one is that we're actually able, through you subscribe to the channel, we're able to unlock numerous other things that we're able to do through that YouTube channel. So we really need you to do that. So for goodness sake, we'd love a like as well. That would be great, even if we screwed up on the camera side. But we would love it if you would subscribe to the channel. That would be really really useful. All of you students out there, you should have your notes pages in front of you. If you haven't, sort that out, please. If you're with your teacher in the classroom this afternoon, they have received, or at least should have received, your notes pages. So give them a stare if they haven't passed them out to you, because that you should have them already. I'm sure most of you have. If you haven't, they are available in the description to the show, just to the stream, just below the sort of the video area. So go and have a look, for those and get those ready, because you are going to need those. Penultimately, we are going to be asking you today to answer some questions for us as well on the website. Marta, are you going to show us that now? Is that a possibility? So you can show the students. You're going to try. Okay, so we've been sort of truly thrown in this moment, I have to say, so just give us a moment. So we are going to ask you all not just to make notes and to actually do the questions as we kind of show them to you and that kind of thing, but moreover, as Marta's showing you now, what you can do is you can go to the everlearner.com. It's live, thank goodness for that. You can go to the everlearner.com, hit news, and as you go to that news, you see the first little kind of story, as it were, there is all about sort of question submission. And the question for this show, for example, Marta's just showing you it now on the screen. Just click on there and you can see you can complete a question for us, submit it. And the idea of that is kind of like a little competition, see who can produce a really nice answer. But more importantly, and we will reward really nice answers, by the way, we're going to give some prizes out for that. But more importantly, what we're going to do with that is we are going to share with everybody really high quality answers that we receive, so everybody can benefit from them. So what we'd like you to do is go onto there. You can do it either in the show or on review later when you're at home or whatever on the next few days, and you can submit answers to that and then give us, like an indication of what would be a magnificent answer to that particular question. So that's really important. And finally, we are gonna have little breaks within this show. There's gonna be sort of a couple of little sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 minute little pauses. Okay, we're gonna be on for about an hour, but there's gonna be some pauses in between. And what we're gonna do, we'll show you more details of this later on. But we are going to ask you to submit your photos to us for what we're referring to as #revision break. hashtag revision break. We'll give you a bit more details on this later on. But what we want to do is what we want to know is, what do you do in those breaks? Do you have a slice of pizza? Do you feed the cat? You know, what are you answering questions that we've set for you? What are you doing within those moments to kind of get yourself ready to come back in that? So we'd like you to submit those to us, and I'll give you more information in a moment how to get that to us on Instagram, on Twitter, and on Facebook. Okay, so you're going to get those to us in a few moments' time. So that's enough of me banging on without any camera. So what we're going to do here is we're going to switch to the camera, the canvas. If you're all ready, I'm going to switch microphones over. This is going to work seamlessly from here because now the problems are behind us. So are we ready? Okay, and I think we're ready to go. So we're going to sort of strike at the heart of muscles and movement here. So let's get on with it straight away. As we know, the person we're interested in this particular moment is Josh. He's a sprinter, and we're going to sort of, I guess, look at the sort of notion of sprinting and some movement and some muscles in a bit of detail here. So first things first, my focus with you guys today is I'm going to talk to you about the hip, and I'm going to talk to you about the ankle. Of course, I am not covering every muscle group, every joint that you guys need to have a solid understanding of. That is your job. That is the job you're going to do with your teachers, and you guys must make sure that you're doing exactly that thing. What I want to do is I want to give you some absolutely superb knowledge on this stuff so that you can sort of apply that directly here and look for equivalent levels of knowledge elsewhere. Let's start with the hip first of all, and really what I want to do here is I want to make sure that although we're looking at kind of muscles here and movement, I want to make sure that we know what our articulations or our joints are. First things first, let me introduce you to the ilium. Okay, the ilium. The ilium is what we might loosely call the pelvis here. I'd like you to use the word ilium if you can. Pelvis is fine if not. We've also, of course, here, we've also got the femur. But specifically, we're looking at this part of the femur up here, sort of like the head of the femur up here. And I'd like you, if you're able to, I'd like you to start referring to this as the femoral head. I'll be right over here for you. The femoral head. And that is the part of the femur which is actually interacting with the ilium and is creating this joint. More muscle stuff to come in a second. Now, the other point I'd make is that the actual socket part of this ball and socket joint here, part of the ilium, has a name as well, and it's called the acetabulum. Okay, so let me write this in over here, the acetabulum. Now, some of your teachers might be saying to you, well, that's kind of a little bit high level for us or whatever. This is a term that, in my opinion, A-level students should be using. Let me be crystal clear. It's not difficult. You can do it, and you should be incorporating it into your exams. All of the exam boards will accept that as an appropriate answer to a question about articulating bones at the hip. Okay, so it's important that you do have a knowledge of it. You've already got ilium there. You can use that, of course, but try and use acetabulum if you can. Just the only thing I'd notice there is, although it's not depicted brilliantly in this image, it's actually quite a deep socket. Okay, so the hip is quite a stable joint. It's kind of useful for you to know. Now, a couple of other features. We also call this bit here, which I'm kind of shading in here, this bit here is what we call the femoral neck. You can use that term if you want to, the femoral neck. Okay, the femoral neck is in there. And you can use that term if you want to. And my last point is to say on these points, if we look at the coverage of the ball and the lining of the socket, of course, what we have in there is we have cartilage. Okay, and that cartilage is used to shock absorb and protect and reduce the friction at that joint. Now, where I'd like to go with this, I'd like to get a good understanding of what muscles actually create movement here. So I'm going to kind of list them really for you, and I'm hoping that you can picture them in your mind. So the first thing for me is I want to look at the notion of hip flexion. Okay, so I'm going to take the notion of hip flexion. Now, let me be clear. Hip flexion is when you lift the leg from the hip and it moves in front of the body, okay? In front of the body through the sagittal plane. And that, of course, is like a kicking action at the hip or kicking forward with the hip. And that is produced, actually, it's actually produced by two muscles. I'll give you them both. One is called the iliacus, and the other one is called the psoas. And what these do, if we add these together, if we add these two muscles together to produce the muscle group, it gives us the iliopsoas muscle. Okay, so you're probably going to use this iliopsoas muscle here, but just know that that's made up of two muscles, the iliacus and the psoas. It's kind of, in my opinion, it's worth knowing. Secondly, I want you to also understand that if we are looking at extension of the hip, extension, we're going to do some questions on this in a moment, extension of the hip is produced predominantly by the gluteus maximus, so that big butt muscle on the back of our kind of upper leg, that surrounds our bum. That gluteus maximus is the muscle which draws the leg back as if you're going to kick behind you in an arabesque or some kind of donkey kick fashion. That the muscle that is the agonist to produce that is that gluteus maximus muscle. So please, please, please ensure that you can differentiate between the role of those different muscles with regard to flexion and extension. Now, I also want to quickly talk about two other and possibly a third other type of movement. So the first one I'd like to talk about is what we would call adduction. Okay, and let me change colors here. Let's go for this. Let's call it adduction. Okay, so adduction is when a person brings the hip, this is along the frontal plane, brings the hip from an abducted position back to the midline of the body. So let's call this back to the midline of the body, as if you're bringing your legs in from a star jump. And we want to know that adduction, I mean, there's actually a few muscles that contribute to this, but I'm going to give you one that's kind of nice for you to use. We can refer there to your adductor longus. Okay, and there's a few other adductor muscles, but that's going to get us home in terms of where we need to be. Now, abduction, which of course is the opposite of this, if we now look at abduction, let me do a different color to that one. If we look at abduction, which of course is taking the hip away from the midline of the body, as if we're going into a star kind of position, or we're in the shape of something like a cartwheel with all limbs spread to make a star shape. That abduction is caused by a couple of muscles, actually a combination of muscles. So I'd like you to be able to refer to the gluteus medius and also the gluteus minimus. And those muscles contract to cause abduction. Now, the only other thing I'm going to say here, it very rarely comes up, is just be aware that the hip is also capable of rotation. Okay, and when I say rotation, the internal rotating of the femur around its longitudinal axis. Now, I'm not going to take that any further, but just be aware that we can achieve rotation at the hip also, but we tend not to talk about it too much within these sessions. Okay, so they're the muscles there that I think you guys really need to grasp. And of course, what we've got here is that as a result of that, if we're talking about abduction, this hip can move out in this, let me choose a color that's going to work here, let's go for green. This hip can move out into this direction. In terms of adduction, it can move back into this direction. When we're talking about flexion extension, the hip is moving back that way for extension and in front of us for flexion. So let's get that clear in our minds, okay? Before we do some question demonstration, I also want to have a look at the ankle. I need to shuffle my notes probably terribly loudly in the background. That wasn't too bad until I dropped this bit of paper on the floor. There you go. So I want to talk here a little bit about the ankle. Now, first thing I want to say about the ankle, and it's sometimes something I've found that students get a little bit confused about, is that the ankle is a hinge joint. Okay, so get that really clear. The ankle, like the knee, like the elbow, is a hinge joint. So we know the ball and socket is at the hip and the shoulder, for example. We know there's hinge at the knee and what am I forgetting? Elbow. But the ankle too is a hinge joint. Now, where it's slightly different with this hinge joint is that, yes, it can move slightly through the movements of inversion and eversion, but we don't study that. So we're going to sort of breeze over that sort of notion. Excuse me. Over that notion here. Now, what I'd like to kind of get clear with you guys, and we've kind of only partially got this in the shot here, is that we've actually, the bones we really want to have an awareness of is that we want to have an awareness of the tibia, okay, which is the shin bone. It's this big bone here that we can see running down this way. We also want to have an awareness of the fibula, which is often called the ankle bone. It's actually on this side. It's a smaller bone that sits alongside the tibia. And the other bone I'd like you to have an awareness of is the talus. Now, the talus is this bone here, okay? The talus is this bone here. So we see these are the articulating bones. But where it gets really interesting for me is when bear in mind, this is not an articulating bone, but it's when we start looking at the role of the calcaneus, for example. Now, the calcaneus is this bone here. Someone told me recently, should we said calcanea. How was it? Calcaneus, sorry. So you use whichever pronunciation you like. So here's our calcaneus or calcaneus here. And of course, what we're finding in this particular with this particular bone is it's attached to this muscle here via this tendon. And I guess you guys all know that this is the Achilles tendon. Colour doesn't really work on that. Let's change it. You guys all know that that is the Achilles tendon, right? So the muscle we want to have an awareness of at the back here is the gastrocnemius muscle. That is the gastrocnemius muscle. And I also want you guys to know that there's another muscle which kind of sits at the back of our calf, and that is what we call the soleus. The soleus muscle, It's a slightly shorter, fatter muscle that also produces the same movement. Now, the movement that these two muscles produce, let's do it like this, the movement that these two muscles produce is what we call plantar flexion. And let me show you a little bit of what that looks like. If I just drag back up to Josh a second, you can see here, this foot is kind of toes pointed there, right? Toes pointed downwards, like as if it was pointing down, but underneath, okay? And that is what we call plantar flexion, okay? Plantar flexion. Let me get this right. Plantar flexion. And that's produced by the gastrocnemius and the soleus. Now, this one here, the front foot, has got like the toes pulled up. And that's achieved by a different muscle. And that other muscle is what we call the tibialis anterior. And I've often found that students get a little bit confused by this muscle. Let me be clear. Tibialis means it runs along the tibia, and anterior means front. So it's on the front of the tibia. So we have a muscle which runs down here. It actually inserts on the big toe. Okay, so it inserts on the big toe. I'm not going to get into technical names of the toes here, but we're just going to say it inserts onto the big toe. And what that does is when that muscle contracts, it brings the foot upwards. And of course, that's what we refer to as dorsiflexion. Now, I've spent many years trying to figure out whether plantar flexion and dorsiflexion are one word or two. And the conclusion I've come to is plantar flexion is two words. Here, look. 1, 2, and dorsiflexion is one word. Okay, so that's the format that I use. Someone might tell you differently, but that's the format I use. So we're interested that dorsiflexion pulls the toes upwards, plantar flexion pulls the toes, and in fact the calcaneus, downwards. All right, nice. Let's do some questions. Let's have a look at this. So the way we're going to do these questions is that, you know, if you sit and watch me write these things in, you're going to get triple bored with me just sort of, you know, stuttering over my poor handwriting. Okay, so we're going to do this slightly different. Instead, what I've done is I've prepared the answers in advance for you, and what we're going to do together is mark them. Now, of course, you guys are able to submit your answers, all being well, as a result of these sessions on these exact questions. Okay, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to go over this with you. So we've got a question here. The question is as follows: when sprinting, Josh's ankle moves through only one plane. Now, I mentioned earlier, do you remember that that plane was the sagittal plane? All flexion and extension move through the sagittal plane. Explain, there's our command, explain how two different muscles combine to control the foot strike and the drive phase of the ankle. Okay, so we're looking at two different features of the ankle, basically what I just showed you above. Now, the thing that jumps out to me as the reader of that question is, okay, there's the knowledge there that I need to have, but it's the word explain, and I can't, let me just change colour. It's the word explain. If you don't know what that means, you're going to have a hard time with this question because it's asking for that specific skill. Now, explain means saying how, why, or what something is or happens. Okay, so it's how, why, or what. And in this case, we're being asked for explain how. So I'm going to try and use in my answers language that develops that. So I'm going to use words like, by. I'm going to use words like through. I'm going to use words like because or causing. I'm going to use words like therefore, comma. Okay, and that way I am making sure that I'm explaining. Now, if you want to know more about that, for goodness sake, use our roadmap model. It teaches you exactly these things that will help. Let's mark this answer. The ankle moves through the sagittal plane. So look, that's going to get us a mark. Circle tick, 1 mark. Okay, so we've recognized the sagittal plane. The gastrocnemius controls the drive phase. Okay, so we've talked about the gastrocnemius. We're going to get a mark for that, and it's in relation to controlling the drying phase. And look what I've got here: by contracting and causing plantar flexion. Okay, so we're going to get a mark there. The tibialis anterior, thank you, controls the foot strike by causing dorsiflexion. Remember, by again. Look, by again there. By, I'm saying, but it's done by the following process. For both phases, the antagonist relaxes to allow the movement to occur. Now, I've already got max, and we could get an extra mark, I suppose, if there was one available, for talking about how the antagonist operates in this sense, more of which in another session. Now, second question I've got here, and it depends which board you're on. If you're at Excel, you need to do that one. Everyone else, you need to do this one. Choose the question which is suitable for your exam board. Fine. We're going to focus on this one. Using a sporting example, describe. Now, for me, describing is giving the main details of something. Okay, so describing is things like characteristics. So we'd say things like characterized by, composed of, composed of. We might say what something is like. We might say what something is not. We might say what something is. These are all descriptive type language or connective. So if we are describing something, we need to be showing that kind of language in our answer. So hip movement. So let me get this right. Using a sporting example, describe the movements of the hip through the sagittal plane. So hip movement in the sagittal plane, I almost wasted a bit of space there, is characterized by, look, there's my description, flexion and extension. I'm giving my answers. Hip flexion when sprinting is caused by the iliopsoas. An extension is caused by the gluteus maximus. Okay, so I'm going to get my max there again, and I could have got an extra mark. I think there's only 3 available to me if if I'd needed that 4th one. So what have I done? That I guess I've always given 1 extra point over and above that, which is the maximum mark, just to make sure. So look, couple of things for me to draw out before we finish this little mini section. One is you must know your movement analysis, you must know your muscles, and you must know how your joints articulate. 2, the most important thing, in my opinion, when you come to do an exam answer, other than knowing your stuff, I mean, there's no substitute for that, let's be honest, but other than knowing your stuff, for goodness sake, you have to know the difference between what it means to describe and what it means to explain. And if you're not sure about evaluating, analysing, comparing, we're going to cover a lot of this, by the way, justifying and so on, you've got to look at our model for the roadmap. I can't urge that enough. Anyway, I'm going to pause this session here, and we'll go back briefly into the studio. When we come back, by the way, onto this part, we're going to be looking at muscular contraction. Straight back. So, Marta, tell me, do we have sound and do we have picture?
Yeah,
tell me. I'm going to bring you two guys in. Do we have sound and picture? Because I'm terrified.
We do seem to have both sound and picture.
Ooh. Yeah, all coming through. You're on the actual stream check, Mike. So are we all right?
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, for a moment, right at the start of that session, the teaching bit is always fine. I kind of enjoy that bit, but right at the start of that session, I'm going to make an A-level P related joke here. I honestly thought my cardiac muscle was going to burst through my intercostals and out of my thoracic cavity, which is not a particularly enjoyable experience because I was terrified there at the start of the session because that went badly wrong. So we kind of recovered a little bit there. If it felt a bit jumpy at the start, trust me, whatever you were worried about was not 1/1,000,000th of what we were going through here. So thank you for being patient with us, and we appreciate it. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I'm going to ask for some questions if questions are coming in, and I'll do my very best to answer them. Obviously, this is live, so if you ask me something I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer. So as long as you guys can live with that. The other thing, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the competition and what we're going to do. So, Mike, what do we have?
Well, we do have one picture which has already come in.
Ooh.
Ellis Whittle sent us a wonderful picture right up his nostrils. So get on Twitter and have a look on the.
I'm going to have to stretch and have a look at this, Mike.
Have a look on our stream on Twitter. You see Ellis Whittle.
You've I can only describe you as a handsome young man.
Banger.
That's unreal. Yeah, that's quite that.
Yeah, something else.
that's quite something.
Okay. Question. We do have one question. Somebody said that they often get confused between the talus and the calcaneus. Any help on that one?
Yeah. So talus and calcaneus. So the essence of that is that the talus is effectively think of it if you like as the first tarsal. It kind of sits on the top of the foot on here, and effectively it articulates at the ankle with the long bones of the lower leg. But the other thing I think is really useful to realize is that calcaneus is absolutely specifically the heel bone, so that kind of pointy bit at the back of your foot. And as I said there in the little teaching bit, the key role of the calcaneus, other than giving us balance and given the structure of the foot, is that it is the insertion point for that Achilles tendon. So anything which is pulling on that Achilles tendon, therefore pointing the toes downwards, is via that calcaneus. So that I guess that would summarize it. In terms of the differences, they're vastly differently shaped. You know, the calcaneus is kind of lumpy and squarish, whereas the talus is smooth and round because it's actually the articulation of the joints. So it needs to kind of smooth. It needs to be rounded for the end of the tibia, for example. So yeah, those would be some differences.
Cool. Another question we've had is, can you quickly cover the 3 planes?
Quickly, yes. I mean, the positive news here is that if your board covers planes, unlike axes, then the planes are basically the same for everybody. So the key thing I'd say to you is that the planes effectively, they help us to describe movement. I want to be clear also here for teachers. Planes are a consideration to use in physiology. This is not a biomechanical principle as such. Okay, so let's make sure we get that clear. So First of all, physiologically, what we're saying is that one of the ones you must know is the sagittal plane. The sagittal plane would run down me like this, so that any time I moved in flexion, for example, there's flexion behind, or flexion that way, I should say, or if I flex on my elbow, for example, indeed the extension, that's happening. It's happening along that plane. It's happening along that plane. Whereas if we talk about the frontal or the coronal plane, it's moving across me like this. So if I abduct, for example, I'm not going to show too much armpit hair here. If I abduct, for example, I'm moving along that plane, and indeed if I adduct, it would be the same at my hips as well, of course. And then finally, the transverse plane sort of cuts me in half like this. So it kind of cuts me like that. Okay. So on that basis, if I rotate something such as my whole body, I'm rotating around that transverse axis. But equally, if I rotate my humerus in the socket of my shoulder, that's also a form of rotation around that transverse plane. So it's let me read. I was moving into axes a little bit there. So rotation happens through the transverse plane. Just bear in mind, not all of you cover that material.
Cool. That's it. That's what we've had so far.
Okay, cool. So a couple of things before we go into sort of part 2. On the competition, there's really 2 things. Was it Elliot? Ellis. Sorry, Ellis is definitely in the lead on.
He's definitely winning. Yeah.
He's definitely winning on competition 1. So we want to find. We want to receive a really cool picture of what you guys do on your revision break. So either in that first little break or in the one that's coming up in a few moments' time, or indeed, you know, having a break from revision tonight when you're studying or whatever. Send us that photo, and if you've got something really, really cool, I think Marta's got going to be showing. Are we going to show them now, Marta? So Marta's going to show these for you as well, I think. How are we doing? So Ellis, a legend. So send those in. But the other thing is, and by the way, if you do come up with a great photo, we're going to send you one of our roadmap packs. You heard me mention it about explaining. It was explaining and describing, just wasn't it? But we'll send you one of these off. But the other thing as well is we want you to answer those questions on that form that Marta showed you right at the start. So please submit an answer or two on those, and that enriches everybody, because we can select some really great answers and share them widely, and that's going to help everybody. So it's a bit of a community thing. We'll award roadmap student packs to the students that do the best answers. Teachers, don't be tempted. This is for students only, you naughty people. Don't come at us with some kind of false name and try and submit your great answer. We want students to do that, and and we're gonna send some roadmap materials off to you. The roadmap's all about, like, writing exam answers, basically. It helps a lot. So that being said, I think we're just about ready to go, Marta. So are you ready to get me on to the next teaching episode? I've now had 4 mics in my life in the last few moments, but I'm going to move from this one to the teaching one. So I'm ready when you are. Okay, so let us focus in on muscular contraction. And for those of you that study it, I'm not beginning to get into twitch and summation, and I'm not going to be getting into slide and filament theory. Those things only appear on some of these courses, so therefore I'm going to be leaving that for the purposes of the EverLearner.com. We have it all covered. Go there, use the resources, free trial, blah blah. Go and get involved, and you can study that stuff there. What we're going to talk about here is types of contraction. Okay, types of contraction. So for me, I kind of decided to feature all of this around a single image. And I know someone's going to give me a hard time because they're going to say, that's not your athlete profile, James. And you're right. I'm making a bit of an exception here. We looked at Josh in the earlier session. And here we're looking at effectively a movement which is kind of useful for us because it involves all different kinds of muscular contractions. So the first thing I want to do is I want to differentiate between 2 types of contraction. So I want to refer to an isotonic contraction, and I want to refer to an isometric contraction. And again, some of you may want to go further and look at actions as a third grouping, okay? And that's fine. I'm not going to touch on it here, but just know that it's there if you're interested. Now, isotonic effectively means with movement. Okay, so it's contraction of the muscle with some kind of movement, whereas isometric, it is with stillness. And I'll come back to this. We're not going to get into sort of principle of moments and the mechanical principles of this, but isometric or equal length means a stillness contraction. So let me explain. So let's assume, for example, that this knee joint here of this performer is going to remain stable for this entire period. This joint here is going to remain at whatever degrees this angle is. It's about 90 degrees, 85, something like that. So that's going to remain stable. So this is being controlled by isometric contractions. Now I'm hoping you will be able to recognize that there are at least two isometric contractions achieving that, okay? So one of them would be of the hamstring group here, okay, and one of them would be of the quadricep group. Now, yes, you guys may well want to use the terms for the hamstring, semimembranosus, semitendinosus, and biceps femoris, and for the quadriceps, make sure I remember them all: the vastus intermedius, lateralis, and medialis, and the rectus femoris. You should be able to name those things, so prepare to be able to do so. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go and use our resources on the EverLearner.com, and you will. Next, so we've got this notion. Now, you notice there, one thing I'd say, let me just repeat what I said a moment ago. Where we've got an isometric contraction, we've always got at least two muscles that are performing that isometric contraction. By definition, we know that muscles work in pairs. So if one muscle is working isometrically, then its pair needs to work isometrically as well to keep that balance. You know, good examples would be like a moment of a skier skiing downhill, alpine skiing, and being in that tuck position and holding that position steady. We'd have numerous muscles contracting isometrically at that time. Now, isotonic is a slightly different case. It splits into two groups. We have what we call our concentric contractions, more of which in a second, and we have what we call our eccentric contractions, not to be confused with eccentric forces, which are which is how we describe a torque, a force applied away from the center of mass of an object causing angular motion. Let's not get confused. It's the same word, different concept. So let's look at these concentric and eccentric notions. So we know isometric is stillness. Let me also actually add in there, we've got same length. That's literally what iso equal. Metric length means the muscle, at least 2 at a time, remains the same length. And of course, in here, we tend to find that we're talking about some kind of balance, and we're often talking about some kind of ready position. Okay, ready position. So, you know, in that case, I was talking about the female performer there. She's in a ready position in the sense that she's ready to receive the ball back. So let's focus on her. This guy, in my opinion, this guy is doing some dodgy techniques. So I'm not going to focus on him because for some reason he seems to be receiving the ball with bent elbows, which is not helpful to me. So what I want to talk about here is I want to talk about this performer, and I want to talk about her tricep brachii. Let me write it up here for you. Her tricep brachii. Remember, there's a double I on the end. It took me years to realise that. How embarrassing. So we've got this tricep brachii, the S on the end of tricep as well, of course, tricep brachii. And it's this muscle at the back of the upper arm. And the tricep brachii, when it contracts, typically what it's going to do is it's going to create elbow extension. Okay, so we can make an argument that for this performer to have moved her elbows into that position, elbow extension, those tricep brachii have contracted. How? They've contracted concentrically for her to throw the medicine ball to or at, who knows, her partner. Okay, so to or at her partner. Now, of course, this ball is going to make its way back to her. Okay, now this is going to be a different situation. So the ball is going to arrive to her hands here. Let me choose approximately a blue color. The ball is going to arrive to her hands here, and of course, what are we going to find that the elbows do? Well, they're going to undertake flexion, but they're not performing flexion like they're pulling the ball in. They're performing flexion in the sense that they're slowing the ball down. Okay, and that's where these tricep brachii muscles, they're going to actually lengthen during this flexion, and they're going to be working at the same time. So let me be clear about this. When we talk about concentric contractions, we are talking about shortening under tension, shortening under tension. Let me make sure we get all of our key language in. Shortening under tension. We are talking about here, decreasing joint angle. Okay, decreasing joint angle, and we're talking here about force generation. Okay, force generation. So when a muscle works concentrically, it shortens under tension, generates force, and it decreases the joint angle. Okay, and by the way, for this one, we're talking about the joint angle here, by the way, not here. Okay, joint angle there. So the eccentric contractions are a little different. They lengthen under tension, lengthen under tension. They also increase joint angle, and they do the following. They act as a brake, as in braking a car or braking a bicycle or something like that. Okay, so they're acting as a brake. So this muscle, as the ball arrives and the elbows flex, the tricep brachii are going to act eccentrically to slow the flight of that ball down, basically in order so it doesn't hit her in the chest, really. So it's going to slow it down gradually, and the tricep brachii is going to do that work while lengthening. And of course, we could also talk about things like the stomach muscles. The rectus abdominis, for example, is effectively going to do the same thing. As she's kind of pushed backwards with the weight and the power of the ball, that muscle is going to lengthen and work under tension to brake, to slow that down. And there'd also be other muscles like the hip flexors as well would do the same thing, but we're not going to get into that kind of detail. So what I'm interested in then is that we've got 3 types of contractions: concentric, isotonic, concentric, isotonic, eccentric, and isometric. Those 3 types of contraction can really go a long way to explaining a vast majority of muscular contraction types that the human body is capable of. Really all of them. And I mentioned before we've got this notion of isokineticness, but that's for another day. So we've got those 3. Now let's have a look at what we want to do with this. Practice questions. So again, same principle as before. I've hidden my answer, which I will reveal. How exciting. So I've revealed my answer here. And we've got a question. Laura does a handspring. There she is. And Laura, by the way, is one of our athletes, very good gymnast, both artistic and rhythmic. Compare is our command word. Let's make a note of that. Compare is our command word. Compare the types of contractions performed by Laura's quadricep. We know that's the front of her thigh. Muscle group during takeoff and landing. Now, it's using the word quadricep, so we can use in our answer. If it talks about rectus femoris, we would specifically use that word as one of the quadriceps. But where I want to focus first is on this compare. So what does comparing mean? Well, it means that we have to compare one thing to another. So by definition, we have to use things like the following language. Comma, space, whereas. However, with a capital, comma. In contrast, comma. Similarly, because when you compare things, they can be the same, of course. Similarly, comma. This is the type of language we'd expect to use in a comparison or a comparing response. And I can't emphasize enough to you that if you're not using that type of language in your answers, you are not comparing in your answers. You might be describing two different things. Now, if I was the examiner, you might think I'm a harsh git here for this, but if I ask you to compare in a question and you don't compare, I'm not going to give you any marks. Now, I'm not saying that's what your exam board's going to do. Often they don't do that because they can be a bit woolly sometimes, but I'm saying to you, if you're asked to compare, you should show a comparison in your answer. Now, I've also said here, look, I've made a, if you like, a deliberate mistake in my answer. Criticize this answer, please. Okay, so we've got a 4-mark question. We've got to compare the quadriceps landing and takeoff. Let's see what we get. During takeoff, see if you get the criticism before I finish. During the takeoff, the quadriceps contract concentrically. So there's the concentrically, comma, space, whereas during landing, they work eccentrically. Circle, tick, or sunglasses, tick, 1 mark. At takeoff, the muscles shorten under tension. In contrast, comma, look. In contrast, comma, they lengthen on landing. Sunglasses, tick, 1 mark. Have you got the criticism yet? At takeoff, they generate force, concentrically, of course, upwards. However, comma, look, there's my however, comma. At landing, they reduce downwards momentum by acting as a brake. Sunglasses, tick, 1 mark. What do you notice is the criticism? I only made 3 comparisons. Do you see what I've done in the answer there? The skill I'm being asked for is to compare. So if I don't compare for 4 marks, what am I doing for 4 marks? Now, I still think that answer I'm probably being super harsh, right? I sort of feel like that's my job at this point before your exams to get you ready. Would you potentially get 4 marks for that answer? Maybe you might do. But I'm trying to drill that home that if you're asked to compare, if you're asked to describe, if you're asked to explain, you must do it. And again, I can't emphasize strongly enough, if you want to learn that better, you have to use our roadmap model, which is wonderful for that. Okay, next question. Justify is our command. Okay, justify the need for the tricep brachii, just looked at it, to perform both concentric and eccentric muscle contractions during a complete press up. So for me, a complete press up is down and up. So I'm going to look at the whole thing, and I've got to justify. So justify statements are things like the reason for this. We might find, and it's the reason for this. One possibility. One possibility. Another reason. You might even in this put, in my opinion. In my opinion. Okay, that is getting towards a conclusion type statement, but you might put that sort of thing, in my opinion, comma. So here, let's have a look. The reason for this, I just said that one, is that during the up phase, the tricep brachii shortens under tension in the up phase, circle tick, 1 mark. And in the down phase, they lengthen under tension, circle tick, 1 mark. Another reason is that the tricep brachii must act as a brake on the way down. Now, notice in this one, I haven't even used the words concentric and eccentric. Why? Why would I not use the words concentric and eccentric? I mean, there's nothing wrong with using them here, but I didn't use them. Why? And the reason for that is I knew they weren't going to get me any marks because they were already in the question. So, okay, I might use them in my answer, but ultimately I'm justifying, and that's what's going to get me the marks. There's nothing for me rewriting the words in the question. Okay, there's nothing for me doing that. So I have to be able to justify why they're like that, or why it happens like that, in order for me to get the marks. So I guess what my duty is here to you guys as you prepare for this stuff is I really want to get you razor sharp thinking about the nature of these questions, get you sort of really well armed to be able to look at a question and go, yeah, I know what that's asking me to do. Yeah. You know, so it's your job to get the content ready, and I guess I'm helping you a little bit with that. But I suppose it's my job, and the teachers around you likewise, to say to you, this is what it means to describe, this is what it means to explain. And I think all of us out there, if we're in a classroom today and we're the adult, we're the teacher, we have to be able to say what that is, right? We have to be able to say, right, young people, to evaluate means exactly this. Yes, I know that the exam boards can give us a bit of grief on that one because they can confuse things a little bit, but if we can't do it, they're not going to be able to do it either. So we have to be able to get that right. So we really want to be able to give you a nice, concise, clear picture of what that is. I am rambling and banging on, so I will close this bit here.
I've improved by a whole grade.
I've improved by a whole grade.
By a whole grade.
My teacher isn't just Mr. Maddock. It's a whole teaching team made up of James, Mike and Marta.
My classroom's all about doing and applying. My days standing at the front of the classroom with a PowerPoint are long gone.
I master every concept by learning at my own pace.
I spend 100% of my class time interacting and supporting individual students.
I move on only when the moment is right for me, not the whole class.
I know what each and every student is mastering and struggling on at every moment.
I know exactly what I need to learn next, and I can go back and review material at any time.
I spend my teaching time supporting and inspiring, not planning, delivering and marking.
I can learn from anywhere at any time.
I can switch off when school closes, knowing they are learning from the best.
My teacher has my homework marked before I get to class.
I set every piece of homework at the start of the year.
I'm 2 weeks ahead of my expected progress.
I can track everyone's progress with a swipe of a finger.
I can track my own progress and set my own targets.
I now have time to focus on developing the skills of every learner in my classroom.
I know exactly what it means to explain, evaluate and analyse, and I'm not afraid of any exam.
My lessons are now far more about the skills and the application, not just the content itself.
I've completely remodeled what it means to be a teacher in my classroom.
And we're back, Marta. Is that right? Well, whew, what a quick fire session. So first things first, let me just up the microphones for you two, Mike and Marta. I haven't even been introduced tonight, but never mind. Any questions, Mr. Pryor?
Yes, somebody said, I don't understand how a muscle can get longer under tension.
Okay, so I don't know which exam board you're on, so I don't know whether to go into the details of the myosin cross bridges and the connection with the actin, but this is a...
Sorry, James, if I can stop you.
Yeah, please.
Mike's microphone sounds really quiet.
Oh, okay.
So you may want to repeat the question so that people know.
How's this?
A little closer?
How's this?
Better.
I'm basically in the microphone.
Better, thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay,
Sorry.
the question was, I don't understand how a muscle can get longer under tension.
Okay, so now you've been told to go further away.
Too close?
Yeah. So, as I said a moment ago, I'm not going to get into the real meat, literally, of that. Because we'd have to go into the theoretical underpinnings of the microscopic protein filaments within the muscle. We have videos of that on the EverLearner, but just to give you a very, very layperson's kind of perspective, within your muscle you have interweaving and interlocking layers in each of the tiny little fibers, which are called myofibrils. I said I wasn't going to do this, now I am. And basically these little, they overlap like this, but they've got like these little arms that go out like this, and they kind of pull on each other. So when the muscle is lengthening like this, they kind of allow it to happen, if that makes sense. I don't know if you kind of get that. So imagine this is it shortened and they're kind of connected here. It kind of lets it lengthen like that, but they're still pulling on it to stop it disappearing in that direction. So I'm not going to get into actin and myosin in the power stroke, but yes, if you want to know more, you need to go to the EverLearner.com and look at sliding filament theory 1 and 2 and the structure of muscle, which we have in numerous of our courses. But it's basically interlocking layers of fibers which pull against each other.
Cool. Got it.
Any others?
Yes. Can you give one more example of an isometric movement?
what did I give there? I gave ready position. So let me think. Any ready position at all. So think about a table tennis player, badminton player receiving serve, for example. Think about what did I say just now? I said about a skier in that downhill position. But basically, the key thing I'd say to you is if there's stillness, there's isometric contraction. So think of sprint start. Everything's an isometric contraction. The entire body, unless the eyes are moving, is an isometric contraction, including both of the pairs on each side of, say, the tibia of each side of the femur, for example. So both pairs are in the isometric contractile state. So that would definitely be one. And again, if you think about any kind of balance in the sense of gymnastics, that would be a really nice one. But I would also say, think about a dynamic example. If I was on a trampoline now, am I going to do this? Hang on. I'm going to show you, then I'm going to describe it. This could go really badly. If I was on a trampoline, one of the things I might do is I might kind of leap, and I might do some kind of pike jump. And while I'm in that pike jump, with those legs out in front of me in this position like this, I'm holding those legs in that position. That means that the hip flexors and hip extensors are working isometrically while I hold the legs in that position, and then of course I'm going to bring them back down underneath me, or indeed swing them round if I'm going to do that kind of crazy swivel hip thing. So any moment of stillness whatsoever, any balance, any ready position, any sprint start position, those kind of things we would describe as isometric contractions. Your job, of course, is you've got to name the specific muscle.
Great, and we have one other question, which is just, can we watch this show later?
Yes. Who asked that?
I can't remember.
Well, whoever you are, that is a good question. Yes, you can. We're going to do two things. So the same link that you're on now will effectively become a recording of this session. Okay, so obviously you're gonna focus on the bits where I'm in the shot, right? Because look, I mean, who wouldn't? But you probably also want to have a look at the teaching elements a little bit as well, and then only the questions. That's probably got some value. It's not just about that. But yes, you can watch it on demand. What I would say to all teachers out there and all students, listen, from my almost ruptured heart from earlier, can I emphasize though to you, it is super useful to us if you guys do attend live as often as possible, because it basically means that we can justify doing this without charging people. Okay, so please follow up on the other side of that. But yes, it's available afterwards.
There is actually one more question which just come in.
Okay.
It's not a PE related question though.
No.
Somebody has, this is their revision break. Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses?
Oh God!
If anybody has a witty comeback for that,
you might need to repeat the question. I don't understand it.
Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck, or 100 duck-sized horses?
Oh my God! Martha's gone.
Harvey Massey.
Harvey, I'm worried.
Good question.
Harvey, you may be some kind of genius. You may be some kind of modern day, genius. So I think the idea of a horse-sized duck scares me quite a lot.
Yeah, I reckon 100. I reckon I could outrun 100 duck-sized horses.
Yeah, there is that too. But I would do like the idea of the large one. You know that sort of noise they make when their bum goes. Bloop? I'd like to know what that noise is. I'd like to know how deep the water is. It would have to be in a pretty deep place. So I'd like
big pond, huh?
Yeah, that's a big pond. Yeah, so that's like that could explain the Loch Ness monster possibly. But that's a great question. So onto competition. So I think we've had a few revision break images, right? We've had a few. No, who was the first guy? It was not. I keep saying his name wrong. It wasn't.
Yeah, Ellis.
Ellis. Sorry, Ellis.
Ellis with a funny up the nostril picture.
That was a good one. Have we had any others?
We had a comment from Jack, which is, love you, James. You're the biceps brachii to my triceps brachii.
Okay, it's getting weird
It's
now.
nice.
That is nice. And of course, who was that again? Sorry?
It's Jack.
Jack, you are making reference there, of course, to the notion of antagonistic pairs. One cannot be without the other, or at least one cannot function without the other. So, Jack, I have to say from me to you, the sentiment is reciprocated, because me doing this daft stuff on YouTube is only relevant if you guys attend and learn. So I couldn't agree with your comment any further. But I think we do need to announce a winner, do we not, Michael? So what are we doing? Are we announcing that winner now, or?
Well, to be fair, I think. Yeah, should we do it at the end?
Oh, we'll do it at the end. Okay,
let's do a winner at the end.
Okay, fine. So we'll come back onto the winner in a moment. Can I remind you all, you students, not teachers with pseudonyms, Can I remind you, students, we would be hugely grateful if you would go and contribute one of your an answer to the questions we've posted on the everlearner.com, and we urge you, whether you are a current subscriber to my PE exam, in which case you already have an account on the EverLearner, see your teacher for details, or indeed if you're a new student or school, to the everlearner.com, go and have a look. One thing I wanted to say about that is, you might think, oh, James is trying to flog us something here. Well, there's kind of some truth to that. I can't pretend we don't use money to kind of make our work sustainable. That is the case. But just one thing I would say to you that's really important is that every single potential user of that website is entitled to a 2-week completely free trial. So go and have a look at that. And even if you just use and abuse it and use it for two weeks and don't sign up after that, that's entirely your prerogative. No one's going to chase you. So feel free to do that. It may well just make a massive difference. We have recorded a gigantic amount of replacement and new additional material. All my old shaky videos have been replaced with kind of really cool kind of modern ones with a decent sound. We've also written nearly 12,000 new questions and beautiful images, I think it's fair to say as well, Mike. We've added in really, really high quality images for the questions as well. So it's going to really help you. Don't forget there's checkpoint tests in there as well, like end of unit tests, where you can really kind of get better quality. Teachers, we've put assignments into that. So if you want to structure revision for your students, I know you don't want me to say that, right? But teachers, if you want to structure the revision for your students, you can literally set assignments through the site, and it will mark everything automatically for you, so you can know they're getting quality through that process. So I can't emphasize that enough. Anyway, that's enough for me promoting stuff. Let's go from there. So where are we? Okay, so we're there. So listen, we're gonna do a competition winner. I can't really judge it because I haven't really seen them. Or do you want me to? Do you want to show me 3 and me pick one?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, hang on a second.
So we've got.
Was that pens up the nose? Who was that?
Yeah, I like Maddie pens up the nose. I think that's my favourite.
Don't go too far. I heard some. There's always those horror stories that you get told.
Yeah, you want to put it on the screen?
Yeah, put them up. Let's get pens up nose. Don't rupture anything. That there's membranes and God knows what up there, so a brain material and stuff. So don't go too far up there, you crazy cats. So,
and don't chew the end of the pen after.
It's a little grim, especially if it's someone else's. Yep. Any others? So we got that there. Any others there? Who is this young person? Ah, okay.
Another one. He sent in 2 now.
Well, so I think Ellis, just from pure. I really like the comment you made. Just read that to me again. It was James. You're the bicep brachii to my tricep brachii. I like that.
You're my bicep to my tricep.
Oh, that is sweet. That is sweet. I would have been more impressed if he'd gone semimembranosus to vastus lateralis, if I'm honest. But I'm probably being picky.
Never pleased, are you?
never say. So I have to say. Oh, we've got one more. Who is this young person? Who is it? Sleeping.
Not sure who this is.
Is he asleep?
I think he's taking a proper break.
Okay,
he took it literally.
I'm gonna assume you're meditating rather than bored stiff, young person. I don't know what your name is, so I'm gonna.
Someone's drawing.
Someone's drawing. That's nice too. Okay, so I'm going to say Ellis. I think you've probably on the idea that you contributed first and you've contributed double. Who is the photo?
You're the biggest fan.
Who was the photo of? I got a horrible feeling that was Mark Sampson for a moment, but it probably isn't. Ellis, you are the winner.
Has it got a Leeds badge, maybe?
Oh,
I don't know.
He's just ruined that. I'm a Forest fan. There's absolutely no chance. So we'll rent out. Seriously, Ellis, we're going to send you. We'll send you a roadmap student pack. So we'll contact you for your address. Just bear in mind when we contact you, Ellis, we are going to need to kind of share that contact also with an adult, so that we communicate with both you and a teacher or something like that. So
maybe best if Ellis gets in touch with us.
Yeah, if Ellis, you get in touch with us and provide us with perhaps your email address and also the email address of your teacher, so we can send it to you in that kind of transparent way. That would be really nice. So I'm gonna ask Marta to push one more thing to the live feed. Other than that, I'm going to say very happy afternoon to you. We have another show tomorrow on cardiac and respiratory health, which is I'm on at 4 tomorrow. You're on at 1 for GCSE Spanish, aren't you, Marta?
Mm-hmm.
So 4 o'clock for me tomorrow afternoon, 1 o'clock for Marta for GCSE Spanish. You're probably not doing both those things. And to all of you who have been involved, I cannot say how much I appreciate you being part of this, not least because we completely screwed up at the start of the session. That was one of the most terrifying experiences of my professional life, I have to say. It was awful. That's never ever happen again. I felt so amateurish. So that's not happening again. But we'll see you guys tomorrow if you're on the ALP show, the GCSE for P for Spanish. This is on demand immediately afterwards on the link. And have a lovely afternoon. We love you all. All the best.
The traditional classroom environment doesn't suit everyone. Students that don't fit this pace of learning begin to lose confidence. The problem is, the current learning model has holes in it. Luckily, the EverLearner.com is here to fill those holes. With the EverLearner Classroom, each student is given a chance to master each subject at their own pace. With thousands of video tutorials and tens of thousands of automated questions on the site, students can progress at their own individual pace. And because every interaction is tracked within the site, teachers can review students' progress and gain access to razor-sharp data. Teachers will have more time to engage with small groups and be better informed of where their time and support is needed. With the EverLearner, teachers can leave the traditional model behind and become facilitators, coaches, and inspirers. There's a reason we have over 100,000 registered students. To learn more, visit our website today.
You're my music, but you tear me to pieces. So where does it come from? The scene that keeps playing on repeat ignores the rule of thumb. Oh, where does it come from? Oh, where does it come from? All your emotions with your heart on your sleeve, it won't fade until you paint it black. I let it burn, you call the fire brigade, but I feel that it will come back. Oh, where does it come from? Oh, where does it come from? Oh, where does it come from? Oh, where does it come Just look at the state we're in. I breathe you in and I can tell where I end and you begin. Where I end and you begin. Where I end and you begin. Oh, where does it come from? Oh, where does it come from? Where does it come from? You're my music, but you tear me to pieces. So where does it come from?